What I would like to share with you today is how we are doing e-invoicing and how we are bringing it onto a global scale. But I would like to start with giving you some background on what DHL is and how we have organized our shared services environments. I'll give you some insight in what we've done so far and what the challenges are that we faced and still are facing, new requirements that we have identified while doing e-invoicing, and how we resolve that in terms of trade shifts and a process for onboarding suppliers. I'll share with you the results of the campaigns that we have been running since the beginning of this year. Maybe a quick word on myself. I've been working in a project and program management environment for the last 20 years, initially mostly in the CRM environment, the last 10 years more into finance. I'm working in the shared service center in Maastricht of DHL for the last 10 years approximately in different roles, and lately focusing on projects or programs in the P2P area in terms of invoice automation, e-billing inbound, and so on. We are a German company headquartered in Bonn, Germany, part of the DAX 30, with a market capitalization of approximately 30 billion. We are present and active in more than 220 countries, which makes us one of the most globally organized companies, with a revenue of approximately 55 billion and almost 500,000 employees, which also there makes us one of the largest employers in the world. A significant part of that is linked to the Deutsche Post, the German postal office, and that's basically the mother company of DHL now. So in the 90s of the previous century, Deutsche Post started acquiring a number of companies like DHL Express, like XL Supply Chain, like Danzas, and so on, in order to build a logistics group with now three, next to the post division, three main divisions, which is the DHL Express, the Global Forwarding Freight, and the Supply Chain division. Shared service center-wise, I'm based in Maastricht, as I mentioned. We've got two other ones, one in San Jose to serve the Americas and one in Kuala Lumpur to serve the Asia region. And within Europe, we have two other ones, one in Central Europe, Ostrava, and one in Cologne for the German market. In terms of shared service center strategy in Europe, we still have activities in countries which mostly are related to the accounts receivables process. We have the shared service center in Maastricht, as mentioned, and we have the satellites in the Americas and in Asia for reducing our costs, playing the wage arbitrage. So in the accounting centers in the countries, it's mostly linked to proximity to DHL end customers, things that require specific language skills or local knowledge, and which involve significant interaction with the local players. In Maastricht, we are focusing on more complex processes for which the countries in itself do not have the scale to build up a team. We try to standardize and harmonize certain processes that we transition into Maastricht, and by doing that we play the role of a kind of transition hub into the satellites in the Americas or in Asia, where we focus on cost and high volume transactions processing and playing the wage arbitrage benefits. A little bit more on the procure-to-pay organization. It's about 500 FTEs. We are running on a large number of different ERPs, and each of those in different templates, different instances, etc., which is still linked to a certain extent to all the acquisitions we did in the 90s and the early 2000s. We are processing about 10 million invoices per year, and 2 million of those are DHL Express. And given the volume, we are looking into ways to increase the efficiency of processing those invoices. So e-billing inbound is one of them. Implementing processes like no PO, no pay policies are contributing to that as well. Shifting to e-invoicing and what we've done so far. We started quite a number of years ago in 2007 with a different supplier, a different partner than Tradeshift, and focusing on a European scope at that moment. And that resulted now, after approximately 7 years, in, depending on the month, 12,000 to 15,000 e-invoices received via that platform every month. This is roughly 30 to 35% of the supplier scope and the invoice volume scope that we handed over to that partner, which is below what we expected. We expected to reach about 70% after 2 years. Which were the main challenges that we faced while doing this? There was a lot of pushback from suppliers as they had to pay in order to be allowed to send invoices to DHL, which especially for the smallest supplier was a big hurdle to take. The bigger ones, certainly if they had other customers on the same platform, were willing to pick up that cost, but the smaller ones had a big issue with it as it was increasing their cost to send invoices significantly. The onboarding process was labor intensive for us and for the partner, so there was an email campaign launched or an email being sent out, after which follow-up calls were done by the partner, but many of those were then referred back to us as they were not getting the decision from our suppliers to onboard to them, and so they reverted them back to us to convince or help convincing those suppliers to onboard onto e-billing. In terms of interoperability, we had a number of suppliers that were sending out electronic invoices already, however, using different platform than the one we used to have or the one that we were proposing to receive our invoices on our end, which made it often a very difficult discussion on how to get the invoice from the supplier's platform onto ours and into our box, which delayed many of the supplier integrations significantly. And lastly, also, we found out that in some of the countries that were in our scope, there was a limited presence of that partner. As a consequence, a limited installed base of suppliers that would quickly generate a base volume of invoices and a lengthy onboarding time to convince those suppliers to connect to a platform that was new in that country or in that market. All of that led basically to the decision, together with procurement, to go back to the market and see whether that platform was still the best for DHL. So we came up with a list of requirements which had to take care of the issues we faced with the previous platform. So we were looking for a partner with a better supplier onboarding methodology, an open network, also open to interoperability with other players in the market. It should be as easy as possible for suppliers to connect and to send invoices, and preferably also free for them in order to take away that argument to do not start sending electronic invoices to us. As we were in the meantime looking for a global solution, global coverage was very important for us, and the platform needed to have some additional capabilities or functionalities. We are sending back invoice statuses, so in order to inform suppliers that their invoice has been received, has been approved, has been paid, and so on, in order to reduce the load in our query handling team, as most of the questions we get there is exactly about the status of their invoices. We are looking into PO flip functionality, where we send PO data onto Tradeshift, where suppliers can very quickly generate the invoice copying the data from the PO, which is increasing significantly the quality of the invoice data that we receive, and as a consequence also has huge benefit in the processing of the invoice on our end. We have implemented dynamic validations, which is contributing to the data quality of the invoices as well, by putting some validations on the platform and forcing suppliers to use the correct cost centers, the correct PO numbers, and so on. And it should, as mentioned, be appealing for the large ones, but also the smaller suppliers to send electronic invoices. And there is a number of ways to do that. So we have, for example, a solution where suppliers can upload PDFs and from there capture the data and submit them as electronic invoices into our systems. A few words on the Tradeshift solution. Tradeshift won that tender, and there's a few elements that were triggering that decision. They have a wide offering in terms of electronic invoicing. All the industry standard formats are accepted. They have a wide range of transfer protocols that can be used by suppliers to interface their invoicing to the platform. So it makes that technical burden as small as possible for suppliers to interact with us. They're compliant in a significant number of countries and growing, so as we are looking into additional territories, they will try to follow that. They have an open network, they're supporting multiple languages, and they're free for suppliers, so suppliers don't have to pay to send invoices on the Tradeshift platform. There's an onboarding app also, which basically requires us to provide the master data of the vendors that we want to approach to convert into electronic invoicing. And we define a campaign within that app that will, depending on the behavior of the supplier to the emails he's receiving, whether he's opening the email or not opening the email, whether he's clicking on a link or not clicking on a link, etc. Take next actions by sending, depending on the behavior, another email with more information or more guidance for the supplier to take them on to the next step. That is proven to be working very successfully so far. So these campaigns run fairly independently without too much interaction from our team, nor the TradeShift team, and suppliers are onboarding independently. Thirdly, we have a business firewall on that platform, which is basically containing validation rules. There's a few static ones like the invoice date, where we have restrictions of which dates can be used by suppliers. So in our case, it's no more than 7 days before or after the current date. There's also a few dynamic ones like the PO data or the cost center data for suppliers that have been identified as a PO supplier, so their invoice should have PO. The supplier is enforced to put a PO number. He is also, well, the PO number he's entering is being validated against a list of open POs that we share with TradeShift, and if the supplier is putting a different number that is not on the open PO list, he will get notified that his invoice cannot be processed as it's not a valid PO number. Similarly, for non-PO vendors, we have a validation on cost centers, so only the valid cost centers can be entered by the suppliers. And through those validations, the processing of the invoices on our side is much more automated on e-invoice level compared to the paper invoices that are coming through. Fourthly, cloud scan. We do have the capability, or suppliers do have the capability, to upload PDFs, and these are converted then into data, and they will go through the same validation rules as the ones I mentioned in point 3, and ensure that from the paper copies of those invoices we still get high quality data into our system. A few more words on the project scope that we negotiated with TradeShift when onboarding on this journey. The initial exercise was focusing on Europe with 1,500 suppliers and approximately 850,000 invoices per year. We are now shifting to phase 2. Within Europe, we are adding more suppliers, more countries, representing approximately 1.3 million invoices on top of that per year. And then a phase 3, which will be for 2015 and onwards, is another 1 million invoices per year. This is the Express business units only. And we are in discussion with other business units like a global forwarding business unit to also add more volume for the non-European countries onto the platform. So these guys are on the platform for Europe, and we try to speak to them to broaden that geographic scope to the other regions as well. When we invite suppliers to onboard, as said, there is an email campaign triggered. If they click on a link to initiate the onboarding process, they see the screen, which is a customized TradeShift DHL screen with a personalized letter from our senior manager introducing the solution, what we want the supplier to do, why we want him to do that, what's in it for him, and how we can onboard and what he needs to do, and so on. And the process that we will take him through to onboard moving forward. We see for suppliers that it's really easy exercise to do that onboarding. It's very straightforward. It's basically a few clicks that he needs to take in order to make the connection from the invite he's getting from us. And we expect through things like the PO flip, which I mentioned before, that will increase even because then we have all the data to him in the PO. He just needs to click 3-4 times and it's connected to us, and his first invoice is returned from the PO into DHL, which is a really strong process to increase conversion of the suppliers into e-billing. So how far did we get until now? So we start the beginning of this year. We are live in 7 countries in Europe as at this moment. We have a few more in campaign and in testing. And we've kicked off Italy, Switzerland and Portugal over the summer. Some of these countries have converted up to 60% of their invoice volume already in this year, within 8-9 months. And we see the invoice volume going through the platform increasing by, depending on the month, 20 to 30%. And we see, well, now an acceleration even after the summer holiday, that it's picking up a bit harder than in the summer or just before that. After this, as of 2015, we'll initiate a global deployment with Express to start with, and in negotiation with the other business units within DHL, like global forwarding and so on. In terms of success, as the onboarding campaigns and the fact that they're running in an automated way is bringing significant benefits to us, because we have a relatively small team to coordinate the campaigns for all of the countries in scope, and we'll be adding more countries as we go global. So we see that the number of interactions we get from suppliers in response to the email campaigns is relatively low, and hence we can support many campaigns in parallel with a fairly small team. and there is hardly any questions from suppliers on how to onboard, so it's a fairly simple exercise for them. In terms of conversion, so as said, we had 1,500 suppliers in scope that we gave to Tradeshift in campaigns. About 50% of them have been onboarded, 3% have rejected because they didn't want to. We are in discussion now with procurement on our strategy to see how hard we can play the exercise towards those suppliers, and that depends on the supplier itself. So we are aligning with procurement on approaching those 3%, and the remainder is still undecided as they go through the email campaigning exercise as we speak. What worked really well in Tradeshift, they have a concept which they offered us, which is the CSM concept, the Customer Success Manager, where basically they've assigned a team to DHL to help us and together with them make this as successful as possible. So they are focused on DHL and we can share goals with them. We discuss any issues we have, improvements we see or that we need. And secondly, the easy and flexible way to allow suppliers to connect to Tradeshift assets, especially for the small suppliers. We see a big increase compared to the previous partner we had. It's really easy for suppliers. We get that feedback on the platform already a few times from those suppliers that it's surprisingly easy to connect. And secondly, the white glove, which is a side product from the Success Manager. Basically, we have identified a rolling list of the main suppliers that we want to onboard. And these are the high volume invoice suppliers that are very important for us to get onto e-invoicing because there will be big benefit in doing so. And we have defined a list together with them of suppliers that we want to onboard, and they take ownership of that onboarding exercise. As it's mainly the bigger ones, they want to have an EDI integration. It's not always possible for them to do one of the standard EDI formats. So Tradeshift, through the white glove exercise, supports and manages basically the onboarding of those top vendors towards us. And the only thing we need to do is sit in status meetings and provide input, but they manage that on our behalf, which is a huge improvement compared to the previous partner we had and helping us a lot. That is what I wanted to share with you today.